Morning Bucknutter. It's Thursday, March 12th. I am Dan Littleman. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5. If it's Thursday, that means one thing. A visit from the esteemed Director of Recruiting from 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong, fresh from his trip to Hollywood. Steve, how are you? Rested, tanned, refreshed?
Good morning, Daniel. Excited to be on Bucknuts Morning Radio, where I know we got some exciting things to talk about today.
You were in L.A. over the weekend for some stuff. Not a lot of Buckeye action out there, huh?
No, it was the Nike football training camp. Yeah, I think the most notable Ohio State item, and not many people are talking about it, but arguably the top linebacker in the state is a young man named Curtis Robinson. He's in the top 247. Caleb Kelly's currently the 5-star guy, and the guy who's listed as the top player in the state and number one linebacker. But Curtis Robinson's not far off. He said that Ohio State's one of the schools recruiting him the hardest they've offered recently. His mom's a professor at UCLA. Stanford just offered. UCLA, Stanford, those are two schools that are high on his list, as well as USC. So him staying out west is likely, but he is visiting Notre Dame next week. He's also talking to Michigan, so I think the power schools in the Midwest will have a chance with him. So we'll see what happens. Right now, I expect him to stay out west, but when you name drop schools like Ohio State and Michigan and Notre Dame, and then you take visits to those schools, they'll certainly have a chance with a young man like this who's very cultured and very open-minded about the recruiting process.
That's an interesting one. I hadn't heard about him. One name we have heard a lot about recently and is included in Bill Kurelich's column this morning, you should get on the site, and I wanted to get your opinion on what you're hearing, is Carter Coughlin, linebacker out of Minnesota. Earlier reports were that he was a very, very strong Minnesota lean. I believe he had some family that attended the school. Things may be changing on that front. Bill Kurlich talked about it. Are you hearing the same things?
Well, I'm going to kick myself if he chooses Ohio State, because when Carter Coughlin got his offer from the Buckeyes, he gave me such great quotes about Ohio State, and he had been at camp earlier that summer where he ran very well and impressed the Ohio State staff. I put in a crystal ball for Ohio State, and people are like, "You're crazy. He's such a legacy. He's a two-time legacy at Minnesota. His grandfather and his father played there. The Minnesota Business School, I know, is attractive to him." And people were like, "You're crazy. He is staying in state." Then he takes a bunch of visits to Minnesota, which obviously in state is close. So finally I buckled, and I changed my crystal ball. And so now I'm sitting on the Gophers. I checked on it on Tuesday. I haven't made a call since Tuesday, and asked around, and was told that at that point Carter was 75% Minnesota, 25% Ohio State. But here's the deal. I mean, if he knew he was going to Minnesota, he'd have committed. There's absolutely no question that Ohio State's given him plenty to think about. If he chooses Ohio State this week, zero surprise here on this end. But obviously Minnesota, there's a lot of pull there. I don't know what he's going to do definitely, but there's no question that Ohio State's very much in the picture here, because if they weren't, he'd be a Gopher.
Interesting. We will definitely keep an eye out for that. The last thing I want to talk about, as we actually try and keep this thing to a reasonable time today, we know how busy you people are, is Justin Layne, the class of 2016 wide receiver out of Cleveland Benedictine. People should know that name. It is the same school that the wonderful Jerome Baker attended and will be in the fold for the Buckeyes this year. Justin Layne, the school that probably got on him earliest was Michigan State. When Ohio State offers, that tends to swing things back Ohio State's way, and if you look at its crystal ball, it does certainly indicate that. But there have been some rumblings that Michigan State doesn't think they're out of it. Are you hearing the same?
Well, I absolutely think that Michigan State's near the top of the list, if not at the top right now. But there's Justin's going to take spring visits, and him and his family are going to go through the process and continue to learn more about their top schools. And the top schools are Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Penn State. Those are the five that I think have the best shot. And then of those five, I would lean towards the Spartans and Buckeyes as the two with the best opportunity. Michigan State's been showing Justin Layne love long before anybody else. They were talking to him back in the fall of his sophomore year and got him on campus, and they were first to offer, and they continue to show great attention. And I know Justin really liked the way that Tony Lippett played this year for the Spartans. That's a guy that he looks up to, and a guy that he's enjoyed being around when he has visited East Lansing. But, hey, Ohio State, there's no question they're in it for him as well. My crystal ball is on Michigan State, mainly because I haven't heard anything that's going to make me change that yet. But again, if he committed to Ohio State today, no one would be surprised. But I do think Michigan State's in a great spot for Justin Layne, as is Ohio State, obviously, and he's getting to know these schools. And Justin played basketball right after the football season, so he hasn't spent a lot of time on recruiting when I last talked to his dad in February. So the picture will become clearer in the spring here on where Justin's truly leaning.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Michigan State, you got to give them credit. They have become, I'm not going to say that they're equal to Ohio State by any stretch, but I think they have become a reasonable option where you could understand it at least, and I'm not sure that was the case a few years ago. Before we leave, anything new on quarterback recruiting for 2016? It seems like I know Bill had something on the Georgia quarterback from Alpharetta that's interesting, but in terms of the Guantanamo or Dwayne Haskins front, everything's still pretty much status quo?
Yeah, I think that it's just a matter of getting guys to campus, and Ohio State will continue to evaluate other guys, and there's plenty of good quarterbacks out there right now that don't have a Buckeyes offer, and I could see a guy or two emerging as a legitimate candidate in the spring and summer, certainly during camp season, and it's a case where I think Ohio State definitely wants to take one, so we'll see who it is. We've talked about Guarantano, and like I said in the fall, I thought he was ready to commit to Ohio State when he visited for the Michigan game. I was told it was a possibility. Obviously, he didn't pull the trigger, but I think it was clear Ohio State was the team to beat at that point. But now it's evident that Rutgers has certainly made a big move there, and he's talking and looking at other schools too. So nothing really new on that front. Dwayne Haskins, the top 100 quarterback, a guy that also, he told me last week that when Ohio State offered him, he thought he was going to be a Buckeye. I mean, that was the dream offer for him. He's, as everyone knows by now, he's my favorite quarterback in the 2016 class. Although I did see Eason 2 weeks ago, and that kid's pretty damn good too. The 5-star going to Georgia. It certainly made me think twice about if Haskins is the number one quarterback in the country, that's for sure. But Haskins told me he wants to get back to Ohio State before deciding, so we'll see if he does, and we'll see if that's something that could be rejuvenated there. The one thing for Haskins that's most important to him when he makes his college decision is his connection with the offensive coordinator. Obviously, there's been some transition in that role at Ohio State since Haskins was first offered, so that'll be big if he does make it back to campus, to seeing how he clicks with the new OC at Ohio State. So that's the latest on the quarterback front. I don't think if I had to guess who Ohio State's quarterback is going to be in the 2016 class, I'd venture to say we're probably not talking about the young man enough right now, because we don't really know much about him as to where he stands with Ohio State. But I think that's something that as the process continues, we see more names emerge. The next quarterback for Ohio State will be one of those names that emerges.
Steve Burrow, Joe. We appreciate Steve's appearance as always. You heard Steve reference the new offensive coordinator and the changes at Ohio State. Obviously, Tom Herman off to Houston. Tim Beck in from Nebraska. Keep it locked to Bucknuts today, Bucknutters, because Tim Beck at spring practice will speak to the media, answer all kinds of questions, and we will have it first for you here on Bucknuts. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. See you guys.